really fucking scary stories. I'm your host, Sam Goodman. Thank you for joining us. We are brought to you today by Pale Horse Media Co. Head over to www.palehorsemedia.co for this podcast and more. You can find our merch store there. You can find books. You can find all kinds of great things over at palehorsemedia.co. Man, oh man, we are back for season 2. I hope that you enjoyed season 1. If you have not tuned in, make sure you go back, give that a listen. We covered a lot of fun things. We went on an amazing haunted road trip, and I hope that season 2 delivers just as many spine-tingling chills and fucking scary stories as season 1. Today, we are going to dive into a little bit of true crime. I thought, what better true crime case to jump into than the West Memphis 3? So there's a great series of documentaries on the West Memphis 3. If you go out and check those out, they're available on Hulu, a couple other places. There's several different ones. There was one that's produced by HBO that's a 3-parter that I would encourage you to go watch, because there's just no way that we can get into all the details of this case. I'm going to give you a really just kind of bite-sized overview, give you some of my thoughts, and we'll just go from there. But you should definitely check out those documentaries. It's just mind-blowing. It's just mind-blowing, and you'll be on the edge of your seat for the entire ride. All right, let's jump into a little bit of an overview of the story. So the West Memphis 3 are 3 men that were convicted as teenagers in the 1994 of the 1993 murders of 3 boys in West Memphis, Arkansas. So Damian Eccles, Jesse Miskelly Jr., and Jason Baldwin, all 3, so spoiler alert, were convicted of brutally murdering and all kinds of other not so great things to 3 young boys in West Memphis, Arkansas. And when I say not so great things, like it's brutal. It's absolutely brutal. So these boys basically disappeared, and they found them in a ditch on the side of the road behind a truck stop / truck wash in West Memphis, right? So they found these boys. If you watch the documentaries, they show quite a bit of the crime scene and crime scene photos, and it's not for the faint of heart. If it's not something that you're prepared for, I would tell you trigger warning, because it is pretty intense. But so these 3 guys, these 3 teenagers, were convicted of killing those boys. So on May 5th, 1993, there were 3 8-year-old boys. Steve Branch, Michael Moore, Christopher Byers. They were reported missing in West I'm in Phoenix if you can't tell, West Memphis, Arkansas. The first report to police came from Byers' adoptive father, John Mark Byers, around 7 p.m., and the boys were allegedly last seen together by some neighbors. So in the affidavits, the neighbors said that they saw these boys playing around 6:30 p.m., they disappeared, and seeing Terry Hobbs, Steve Branch's stepfather, calling them to come home. So initial police searches were made that night. It was pretty limited. They didn't really look for the boys that hard. Friends and neighbors, the community came together. They were searching for the boys, and basically none of that was any luck. But then at some point, there was a cursory visit to the location where the bodies were later found, but they didn't find anything. So the more thorough police search started around 8 a.m. on May 6th, and it was led by the local Crittenden, I think that's how you pronounce it, Crittenden County search and rescue personnel. They did the whole search and rescue thing all over West Memphis. They canvassed. They primarily focused on this Robin Hood Hills area where the boys were reported last seen by the neighbors. Around 1:45 p.m., so much later on in that day, juvenile parole officer Steve Jones spotted a boy's black shoe floating in a muddy creek that led to like a drainage canal in that Robin Hood Hills area. And a subsequent search of that ditch revealed the bodies of the 3 boys. So they kind of backtracked from the shoe, and they found the bodies. The boys were not in great condition when they found them. They had been stripped naked. They were hogtied with their own shoelaces. Their ankles were tied to the wrists behind their backs. The same with their left arms and legs. Their clothing was found in the creek. Some of it was twisted around sticks and then pushed down into the muddy ditch. So if you're looking at this ditch, almost think like small creek. There's like water flowing through it, right? So you get down the water, it's probably like knee deep, maybe a little deeper water. So they're pushing the clothes down into the water, which is just bizarre looking at it from the outside. Again, I'll reference you back to some of the documentaries made on this if you want to get a closer look at it. But the clothes were mostly turned inside out. There was 2 pairs of the boys' underwear that was just never found, never recovered. Christopher Byers had lacerations to various parts of his body, and there was mutilation to his nether region, or his scrotum, his penis. There was just basically gone. Right, there was a lot of mutilation and just multiple injuries all over the boys. The autopsies, the forensic autopsies were done, and basically they just concluded that the boys died of multiple injuries. And Moore and Branch, the Byers boy died of multiple injuries. Moore and Branch died of multiple injuries with drowning. Seeing this scene, police initially suspected that the boys had been raped. But later, looking at this, later expert testimony disputed those findings. Trace amounts of sperm DNA were found on pairs of pants from the scene. The prosecution claims that Byers' wounds were a result of a knife attack and that he had been purposefully castrated and murdered. Defense experts claim that the injuries were most likely the result of animal predation. So post-mortem, the boys had been dumped and they were, dined upon by animals, which, if you follow along with forensic stuff, if you take a look at stuff like this, that is not uncommon. Coyotes and other predators that just really kind of wander around and scavenge. Meat is meat, I guess. So they assumed, or the defense presented, that was the case. One thing that you'll notice when you're watching the documentaries or you start looking into the case is in the crime scene, there is just an apparent lack of blood. You would just expect to find blood in these situations, and it's just not present. It's not present on the ground. It's not present around the boys. It's not present anywhere. There's just an apparent lack of blood, and it's just kind of mind-boggling. Without jumping too far ahead, it leads one to believe that the boys were murdered somewhere else and then dumped in the ditch. That's just kind of the common sense answer, and the defense presents that at different points throughout the trials as well. But let's go ahead and fast forward some. But first, obviously, rest in peace to the victims, Steve Edward Branch, Christopher Mark Byers, James Michael Moore. Such a huge loss of life. 3 8-year-old boys just starting life, not even really started life yet, to go through such a horrible, horrible thing. So originally, the police are kind of just browsing around. They don't really have any good leads, and then they start to hone in on 3 suspects. And the only way to describe these 3 suspects, and they have a couple others, but these ones, or these suspects are high on the list. They wear black. They're into heavy metal music. There's some allegations of maybe some satanic practices. And you have to kind of go back to this time, right? You have to go back to the mid-90s, right? We're in the middle of the Satanic Panic, which we're going to look now and know that all that was kind of bullshit, right? It was just middle America scared, thinking that the Satanists were murdering everyone, and that's just there's no evidence of that. Let's just throw that out there, that it's just kind of hocus pocus bogus, right? But these guys fit the bill. They were scary. There was allegations of Satanism, of satanistic rituals. They all wore black. They had weird hair. They listened to Metallica. Side note on those documentaries is the entire, at least with the HBO documentaries, the entire documentary is background music from Metallica, which is pretty interesting. But at the time of their arrest, so they were arrested, these suspects were arrested. Jesse Miskelly, he was 17 years old. Jason Baldwin was 16-year-old. And Damian Eccles was 18 years old. Baldwin and Eccles had been previously arrested for vandalism, shoplifting. So let's just say, basic kind of troublemaker teenage boy kind of stuff, right? Eccles and Baldwin were close friends. They bonded over their similar tastes in music and fiction. They shared distaste for the kind of the current cultural climate of West Memphis. They were in the Bible Belt. They just didn't fit in. It's like, for me being like kind of like a weird outsider kid at different points in my life, and most of us have been in that position at some point. They were that, right? They were just the weird outsider kids. It's like, ooh, scary, different. And ooh, scary, different when folks are looking for someone to blame for a murder is a prime target, right? Let's just say prime target. Eccles' family was poor and received frequent visits from social services. He was rarely attended school. He had a girlfriend and had run off and later broken into a trailer. They were arrested for that. Only Eccles was charged with the burglary. He spent several months in a mental institution in Arkansas. He received full disability. I mean, this kind of whole list of stuff was just kind of leading up to them being perfect suspects. I'll say perfect suspects despite the fact that there was really no evidence. From what I've read, from what I've seen, from the documentaries, from the stuff that I've researched, I'm watching these trials, and you can just see in kind of jurors' eyes that they're just like, no, these guys did it. They just knew. They just knew, right? Without any evidence. And I'm kind of putting myself in their position, and I try to approach things as unbiased as I can. And I'm just looking at it going, there's no way that I could say, beyond a reasonable doubt, that these guys were guilty. Everything was circumstantial. It was just insane. Other than Miss Kelly, who, let me throw this out there, had a very, very low IQ. Like, at the time that he went to trial, I don't even know if he was capable of reading. Like, it was just kind of sad. And the police, like, his IQ was in like the 70s. And the police basically coerced a confession out of them. There was several hours of intense interrogation that was not recorded, and then all of a sudden the recorder comes on and he confesses, and then the recorder goes off, right? That's the only part that they really recorded. So they basically lock this guy up in a room, and they go on and on and on and on and on. And then eventually he goes, fine, I'll just tell you whatever you want to, just leave me alone. And that's what he did. They kind of led him down. You can listen to all this stuff on the internet. They led him down this road, and you could just follow along and see how he was kind of coaxed into saying different things. Like, they started with a time saying that, I was doing this, at, around noon. And they're like, you mean 7, right? 7 p.m., right? No, around noon. No, you mean 7, right? And eventually they lead him into saying, yeah, I guess 7. I guess that works. So Miss Kelly's trial. So they had a guy there, Richard Offshay, an expert in false confessions and police coercion, professor of sociology from UC Berkeley, that testified on that brief recording as a classic example of police coercion. Critics have also stated that Miss Kelly's various confessions were in many respects inconsistent with each other. So his confessions changed, and they didn't really align with the facts of what happened. So there was that. And there was really no other evidence other than that, right? There just wasn't. It was kind of like, here's this coerced confession. Here's a lot of experts that refute the coerced confession. But look at him. He wears black and listens to Metallica, and somebody said that he's a Satanist. And boom, that's enough. Convicted, right? Convicted. That was enough during the Satanic Panic during the mid-90s to convict this guy. So on February 5th, 1994, Miss Kelly was convicted by a jury of 1 count of first-degree murder, 2 counts of second-degree murder, and he was sentenced to life plus 40 years in prison. Eccles, there we go. Eccles and Baldwin were tried together. 3 weeks later, they went on trial. The prosecution accused the 3 young men of committing satanic murder. This is what the entire trial was hinged upon. The fact that these were Satanists and they wanted to eat children, basically. That was basically it. Eccles had some differing religious beliefs. He was wicked. He had some other things that were, unfortunately, played against him, in this situation in small-town Arkansas, or West Memphis, Arkansas. So it kind of fed right into this theory of satanic murder.